Hello and welcome to Lesson 11, Forensic Psychology, Anger Management. So what we're going to look at in this session is how we deal with offending behaviour, specifically those offences or that behaviour that is caused largely by anger issues. So anger and crime, there's long been established a relationship between anger and crime, so the dysfunctional production of MAOA, which can lead to increase in aggression. We see testosterone, which is linked to aggression, arousal seeking, hostile attribution bias, and psychoticism. So anger and aggression seem to be linked. However, you need to understand that there is a difference. Aggression is the overt, often harmful behavior, some form of social interaction, screaming, violence, and so forth. Anger is an emotion that is often behind aggression, but not always. So understand that these two are separate, and what we are primarily looking at is the effect of anger and anger management systems. So, how do we manage maladaptive anger? Well, there are a couple of different ways of measuring it, for example. First of all, so we measure it using scales, often self-report measures, and you know what all the strengths and limitations of those are. The Novico anger scale is a fairly common one we use, and Dr. Di Giuseppe has published two tests, one for adults, one for children, designed to measure maladaptive anger. So anger management, how do you deal if you just can't seem to control your feelings of anger? This is Novico 2013, refers to prisoners as efficient anger factories. They overcrowd people, they push them into tiny spaces, they're already predisposed to aggression and anger. So he argues that the worst way you could set this up is by funneling all these really angry people in a limited space where there are limited resources and limited opportunities to express that anger in a legitimate way. Anger management is a cognitive solution that aims to change the individual's response and thinking to a particular situation. So this is different to token economy, which just focuses on the observed behavior and rewards and changes that. This is about changing your cognitive response to particular situations. So the aims of anger management are three: cognitive restructuring, regulation of arousal, and behavioral strategies. And we're going to look at one specific type right now, and this is called stress inoculation therapy. So it's a psychotherapy whose purpose is to equip you with the skills so that when you arrive at those situations that would normally trigger anger, you can deal with them in a more adaptive way. Essentially, it comes from the idea of medicine, of being inoculated against a particular disease. So if you have a vaccine, when you experience that disease, you get infected, it doesn't have the same harmful effects as it would have if you were not immune. So it involves things like cognitive preparation. You identify those situations that make you most angry. A common situation is road rage. So people tend to get very angry in their cars on the road. This is because of the threatening situation that is driving, especially on a motorway, where you are moving at high speeds. One wrong move can result in your demise and so forth. So, stress inoculation, and there's a lot more in your guide notes, but it involves skills training, self-regulation, cognitive flexibility, and relations. So this is self-regulation, that's to do with your emotional arousal, cognitive flexibility, having a range of different responses to a particular situation. And then applications training, and this is where you take what you've learned, these strategies, these skills, and you apply them to specific incidences without having to try them out in the real world. So a lot of these are done in controlled settings, scenarios, and there's even some interesting work being done with virtual reality where people are posed with threatening situations and they do a sort of self-talk as they go through it, describing how they are going to respond to it. Success of anger management then, does it even work? That's got to be the key. Well, Taylor and Novico reported 75% improvement rates, and this was based on 6 meta-analyses, so that's quite a strong effect size. So generally, anger management does seem to reduce anger levels. Landenberger and Lipsey analysed 58 studies using CBT with offenders, which also can be used to reduce anger levels, 20 of which used anger controls as part of their therapy. They found that having an anger control element was significantly related to the amount of improvement. So CBT for a whole range of behavioural issues that contains an anger control element. Howells et al. 2005 cite 5 meta-analyses in which they showed only moderate benefits. So really you've got there's strong evidence from Taylor, however, Howells argues blah blah blah, and you treat it in that sort of yeah but sort of idea. Some of the limitations though is there's no consistent methodology for anger management. There's no overarching this is the program. And programs may differ slightly, and therefore we may find it difficult to compare the two. Durations of programs may vary, especially if they're in prison. Prisoners may only be in prison for certain lengths of time anyway. Therefore, the program may finish before their term may have finished before they finish the program. Some programs may last for months and years, others a couple of weeks. Effectiveness relies on accurate measure of anger, and we've looked at 2 measures previously, but most of them are self-report. And self-report is subject to social desirability bias, demand characteristics. If you're in prison and part of your condition for parole or release from prison is a reduction in visible anger, you may try to game that system by getting yourself enrolled on anger management courses, playing down your anger levels in order to get out, and that can affect the results. And we have the hello goodbye effect, where people come in, they seem to show improvement because they're caught up in the therapy. They're really trying to show that the therapy works. They're trying to help the therapist in many ways, but after they're gone and we say goodbye to them, the positive effects diminish. Short-term versus long-term goals then. Most programs assess short-term effects of anger management. Maguire looked at a number of studies and found some instances reduction in reoffending after 1 year compared to individuals just on probation. So maybe we can stretch it to a year, but the success of the program is likely related to more than just anger management. And it could be the general therapeutical support. Just having someone there who's going to talk to you about your anger issues may be more helpful. And of course, once you've left the program, that support pretty much disappears. Further evidence, there's 2 studies. We've got Ireland, 87 young male offenders. Baseline measure was made on anger. Each participant was assessed by a member of prison staff. The experimental group had 50 participants, control 37. Treatment consisted of 12 one-hour sessions. So this will be a short-term anger management therapy. After 8 weeks, the participants were reassessed. Self-report and self-assessment, finding significant improvements in the experimental group. But again, we don't know anything about the long-term effects here. And Trimble et al. 2015 reported on an anger management program of 105 offenders. This was a condition of their release, taking part in the study. 9 weekly sessions, 2 hours each. It was found that the program significantly reduced expressions of anger, as well as the amount of anger experienced amongst young offenders. So there is some evidence to suggest that anger management works, especially in the short term, perhaps less effective in the long term if support is not continued. However, all of this is predicated on one single relationship, that anger and aggression are linked, or anger and crime are linked. Loads of Fanous claim that research that's linked anger to crime is based on laboratory studies. And actually, in real life, the levels of anger between violent and non-violent offenders tends to be the same. So they both experience the same amount of anger. They're just not, in one case, expressing it, in one case, they are. And so this may question the whole anger management strategy. If anger levels are present in both violent, non-violent criminals, then reducing those anger levels won't necessarily reduce violent crime. Another problem is it can actually provide an excuse for why someone commits the crimes they do. If you tell someone you've got an anger management problem, that almost lets them off the hook. It's medicalizing what is essentially a really poor choice to commit a crime. Howes et al. Argues anger is not a sufficient nor a necessary condition for violent crime, and we sort of hit on that already. So many people commit violent crimes who don't have particularly high anger levels. And then we have RIDAs. So therapy does not recognise genetic predisposition. Everyone comes in, they're treated, but actually some people may have severe impulse control, extremely abnormal levels of testosterone and other biochemicals that we know are related to it. It is a cognitive approach, so we could compare it with other approaches. Is it a more humane approach to deal with people's anger rather than just locking them up? You could argue that. What would humanism argue about treating the individual? Just treating their anger issues alone doesn't recognise the individual as a complex, multifaceted person. It just says that you're just angry and we deal with the anger and that's what will solve it. But often these people have low IQs, they're uneducated, they have poor prospects, they have dysfunctional families, their interpersonal relationship, all these factors fit in. And yet anger management tends to focus on just one element, your anger levels. Gender bias, it's not clear that females are affected by the same levels of anger as men, and it's not clear that those levels of anger have any relationship to crime. And culture bias, could it be argued that anger is actually a normal, healthy emotion when expressed adaptively, normally? However, are there cultural differences in the expression of anger? Are there, for example, negative stereotypes that are associated? If we think people who are angry are more likely to commit crime, do we take subpopulations who show high levels of anger as more likely to be criminals? Most importantly, it requires personal motivation to even work. So these studies are biased often by either having some reward at the end, reduction in sentencing, parole, but also people who volunteer themselves for anger management are those people who are most likely to go through the therapy and get the most out of it. So there may be some biasing in the results. Summing up then, difference between anger and aggression, dealing with anger through cognitive restructuring, regulation of arousal and behavioural strategies, stress inoculation, and research is pretty much out on the whole deal. Some wider reading, if you want to have a pause, have a look. There's a good talk about prisons on TED that's well worth, and it deals with anger specifically. And there's a great Guardian article worth reading. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you around.